The sky above Earth looked calm that morning, but Captain Leora felt something restless moving beneath its quiet blue as her small Vakari scout ship drifted through the upper atmosphere, her hands trembling slightly on the controls because nothing about this mission felt ordinary. She had visited dozens of developing worlds before, but the silence around Earth felt different, heavier, like a sleeping beast breathing under the soil, the clouds, the oceans, something she could not yet name but could feel like a pulse against her chest. Leora's crew believed Earth was harmless, a peaceful world far from the violent empires of the galaxy. Yet their first scan shattered that comfort. The sensors flickered with readings far beyond anything they expected. The ground below showed scars, old battle lines carved into deserts, burned rings where the soil itself still screamed with radiation, abandoned test zones where the atmosphere remained bruised even after decades. Nothing made sense. No primitive world should carry wounds this large. She leaned closer to the holographic display as it replayed a fragment of old human footage recovered from Earth's satellite memory. The video was grainy, shaky, but the explosion it captured was so violent that even her armored suit vibrated as if the blast could reach across time, a single fireball consuming an entire valley in a wave of white light. She froze as the heat signature spiked so high her visor darkened to protect her eyes. She whispered a trembling breath, unsure if she was watching history or a warning. Her second officer, Kale, tried to laugh it off, saying humans were exaggerating their strength, that all young civilizations recorded themselves dramatically. But Leora heard fear behind his words, the kind that made his voice tighten and his breath slow down, the kind that made him avoid the screen even as he pretended to be brave. The rest of the crew looked to her for answers, but she had none, because what she saw on that screen did not belong to a peaceful, isolated species. It belonged to a war machine that chose not to move. They descended toward an old human battlefield marked as inactive for more than 50 years. The land looked calm from above, just a wide plain of cracked earth and broken stones. But the moment they stepped out, their boots sank into soil that still held heat trapped deep within. Faint vibrations hummed under the surface like the echo of a giant heart. Leora's scanner lit up with red warnings she had never seen before. The radiation level was lower than lethal, but higher than any non-war planet should have, and the metallic fragments on the ground were unlike any weapon she had studied. She knelt and picked up a piece the size of a fingernail. The material warped and melted into strange, twisted shapes the moment the scanner touched it. A shrill alarm pierced the cold air. Even the device seemed terrified. The readings suggested the fragment had once been part of a detonation so intense, it rewrote the structure of matter itself. She stared at it like it was a fragment of a dead star, something that should not exist in the hands of any species still breathing. Her crew backed away, whispering among themselves, wondering why humans had such destructive power yet never used it on other worlds, wondering how a species that claimed peace had once created storms that could erase life in an instant. Leora felt a strange mix of fear and fascination rising inside her, because the deeper they searched, the clearer the pattern became. These ruins were not built for conquest. They were built out of desperation, defense, survival. Like humans had once fought something just as strong as themselves and barely survived the cost. As the sun shifted and shadows stretched across the broken field, Leora found herself staring at the horizon, where the remains of old human machines rested half-buried in dust. Tanks melted into solid lumps of metal. Towers snapped like fragile bones. Even the sky above seemed scarred with faint lines from old missile trails. She imagined the chaos that once raged here. The heat, the screams, the storms of fire tearing the clouds apart. Yet the strange part was not the destruction, but the silence that followed it, because humans had chosen to walk away from it, chosen to stop building these weapons, chosen peace after holding the power to shatter worlds. She recorded her findings but hesitated before sending them, because she already knew what her superiors would say. They would want explanations. They would want proof. They would want answers that she did not have. She could only feel the truth in her bones. Humans were not weak or harmless. They were something far more dangerous, a species that mastered war so completely, they became afraid of their own strength. As dusk settled, her team prepared to leave. But Leora stayed a moment longer, staring at the darkening sky, feeling the weight of unseen history pressing over the silent land. She whispered to herself, barely audible over the wind, if this is what they used to fight themselves, what would they do to someone who threatens them now? She didn't know it yet. But this single question would unravel everything she believed about power, peace, and the true nature of the human species. and it would lead her toward a meeting with the one human who would change the fate of two worlds forever. Commander Ryan Hale, the man who carried humanity's darkest knowledge behind calm eyes, and the only one who understood why humans avoided war. The night grew colder, the battlefield silent again. But Leora felt certain of one thing. This planet was not sleeping, it was watching, waiting, and humanity's true strength had only begun to reveal itself. The shuttle door slid open with a soft hiss, and Captain Leora felt her pulse stumble as she stepped onto the polished floor of Earth's Alliance Command. The air warmer here than the battlefield she had visited, carrying a quiet hum of energy that made her feel watched, not by machines but by a presence she could not yet see. Every instinct inside her whispered that she was crossing into the heart of something powerful, something awake, something that had been waiting for her arrival long before she ever knew this mission existed. Human guards lined the corridor, their armor dark and simple, their movements calm but disciplined. They did not stare or challenge her, yet something in their posture made her breath tighten. They behaved like predators who had learned patience, their silence more intimidating than any threat. Leora walked between them, feeling small and exposed under their focused stillness. Kyle walked behind her, whispering nervously that he didn't like how quiet the humans were, that no species should be this calm while hosting a foreign military captain. But Leora could not answer him because she sensed something deeper. The humans were not calm because they felt safe. They were calm because they knew exactly what they were capable of if danger ever rose in this room. At the end of the long hallway stood Commander Ryan Hale, the human she had been told would speak on behalf of Earth. He was taller than she expected, with a steady gaze that seemed to read her thoughts before she spoke. His uniform was simple, clean without medals or symbols of power, yet everything about him radiated authority, not the kind that demands obedience, but the kind earned through surviving things that leave shadows behind a person's eyes, shadows she recognized even if she could not understand their shape. He stepped forward and extended his hand, a human gesture of respect. She hesitated only a second before placing her own hand in his, and the warmth of his skin startled her. Humans felt softer than Vakari, yet his grip carried a quiet strength, controlled, deliberate, like he understood exactly how much power he held and how dangerous it could be if misused. "Welcome to Earth, Captain Leora," he said, his voice calm but carrying a depth that made her chest tighten. He didn't sound like a soldier greeting a visitor. He sounded like someone bracing for a truth he already knew was coming. She followed him into a briefing chamber where holographic screens lit up around them, showing old human battlefields, weapon tests, crumbled cities, and firestorms that still made her throat burn just looking at them. Ryan stood beside her, watching the images with an expression she could not decipher. A mix of regret, sorrow, and something colder. Something that made her realize he had seen these things not through screens but through his own eyes. She gathered her courage and met his gaze, her voice barely steady as she asked the question that had kept her awake since she touched that scorched metal fragment. "Commander Hale, why does your world hold this level of destruction? Yet your people claim to be peaceful." Ryan did not answer immediately. He looked at the images again, his jaw tightening as if the memories behind them still hurt. Then he exhaled slowly, the sound quiet yet heavy with years of silence. "Because peace means nothing if you have never seen what war really costs." Leora felt her breath catch. His words were simple but carried a weight that pressed against her mind. She asked another question, softer this time. "Your weapons are unlike anything in the galaxy. Why create something so powerful only to lock it away?" He turned toward her, his eyes deep and steady, and for the first time she felt a trace of fear run down her spine. Not because of him, but because of what he represented. "We created them to survive ourselves," he said. "Before humanity learned unity, we nearly destroyed our own planet. We built weapons to end enemies we once called neighbors. We burned cities we once called home." She tried to imagine that level of conflict. Entire nations tearing each other apart with weapons so precise and brutal they could erase mountains. She imagined the skies filled. Smoke, oceans boiling, fields turned to ash, and her stomach twisted because she realized no alien empire had ever pushed humans to this edge. Humans had done it to themselves. Ryan continued, his voice growing quieter. "When the war finally ended, we understood something no other species truly understands. Power without restraint becomes extinction." Leora studied his face, searching for exaggeration or pride, but found neither. Instead, she saw grief, deep and old, the kind that carves itself into a soul and never fully heals. She realized humans did not fear war because they were weak. Humans feared war because they understood it too well. A soft alarm chimed through the chamber, and an Earth AI announced an incoming transmission from a neighboring alien empire, requesting updates on Earth's defenses. Leora noticed how Ryan's expression sharpened but remained composed. He nodded calmly as if such inquiries were routine, as if the galaxy's watchful eyes were just another weight he carried every day. When the transmission ended, she turned toward him again, her voice almost a whisper. "Do other species know the full extent of your power?" He paused, then shook his head slowly. "No, and if we are lucky, they never will." The answer hit her harder than she expected. Humans did not hide their power out of selfishness or superiority. They hid it out of fear of what would happen if it was ever unleashed again. She realized she had walked into this meeting expecting a dangerous species, but what stood before her was something far more complicated. A species strong enough to conquer worlds but wise enough to refuse the temptation. As the meeting ended, Ryan guided her toward the observation deck where Earth stretched beneath her like a living painting. Blue oceans glowing under sunlight, green forests breathing across continents, city lights flickering like stars fallen onto the land. He stood beside her, his voice low and steady. "We protect our home, Captain, but we do not seek war." "Not anymore." Leora stared at the planet below, feeling the quiet heartbeat of humanity humming beneath her feet, and she knew she had stepped into the beginning of something much larger than a diplomatic visit. She had stepped into a mystery, a truth and a warning woven into one. What she didn't know was that another empire was already watching Earth closely, and the question she feared the most was waiting in the shadows, not about what humans had done, but about what they would do if pushed again. The next morning rose with a soft golden light spreading across the training valley. Yet Captain Leora felt none of its warmth as she followed Commander Ryan Hale through the secure gates of Earth's deepest military testing zone. The air itself felt charged, like the ground was holding its breath, waiting for something ancient and powerful to wake beneath it. She walked beside him with steady steps, but her heart moved with a quiet tremble, because today she would finally see what humanity kept hidden behind silence. Ryan walked ahead with the calmness of a man who had faced firestorms before and survived them. His posture relaxed but sharp, every movement controlled, never wasted, like he carried an invisible weight on his shoulders and had grown used to the heaviness long ago. He spoke little as they moved, yet each word carried the gravity of a story too large to describe, too painful to relive. Leora found herself studying him more than she meant to, wondering what horrors his eyes had witnessed and how he still walked with such calm restraint. The valley stretched wide beneath them, a barren desert carved by old wind and forgotten storms, the sky above a perfect clear blue, innocent and quiet. But far below the surface slept weapons she could not imagine. Ryan stopped near a reinforced bunker built into the stone cliffs, guarded by silent machines and heavily armored soldiers who saluted him with a precision that echoed discipline, fear, and unwavering respect. He turned toward Leora, his voice low but steady. "You asked for truth, Captain. Today you will see part of it. Only a part." The warning in his tone made her chest tighten. She nodded slowly, gripping her scanner even though she doubted it would survive long in whatever field they were entering. Ryan motioned to a technician who began powering up the valley's systems. The ground trembled with a soft rumble as ancient machinery awakened, lights flickering along the cliffs like old memories returning to life. The first test was simple according to human standards, but Leora felt her throat close as she watched the artillery device extend from the bunker wall, its long barrel glinting in the sun like the edge of a silent predator's tooth. The technician locked the coordinates into a distant target nearly 60 kilometers away, a small metal plate the size of a storage crate. The weapon fired with a single muted thump, barely louder than a heartbeat. Yet the ground beneath her boots shook, and a split second later the metal plate exploded into dust, nothing left but a faint cloud drifting in the wind. She turned to Ryan in disbelief, but he only watched the horizon unmoved, as if such precision was nothing to him. The second demonstration came from a railgun hidden inside a carved mountain chamber. When the gate opened, the enormous gun extended like the arm of a giant waking from stone, its inner coils humming with a power she could feel trembling in her bones. Ryan explained that the railgun used electromagnetic force to launch a metal rod faster than most ships could fly. Leora opened her mouth to ask how fast, but the weapon fired before she could breathe. The sound tore through the valley like a thunderclap ripping the sky apart. A streak of light shattered the air and the rod vanished into the horizon. Seconds later, an entire cliff face miles away collapsed into dust, the stone falling in a slow-motion avalanche that swallowed the earth in a coughing cloud. Her legs felt weak as she stared at the ruins. Knowing that even the strongest Vakari capital ships would break under such a weapon, Kale whispered behind her, sounding as if his voice belonged to a terrified child. This is impossible. She wanted to tell him it was an illusion, a simulation, anything to calm him. But the trembling ground told her the truth. Humans were showing her only small pieces of their power, pieces they considered safe, pieces they thought were acceptable to reveal. But the final demonstration held no warning, no slow build-up. Only a quiet drone rising into the air with a small silver device hanging beneath it. Leora felt uneasy the moment she saw it. Its shape too simple, its silence too deep. Ryan stepped beside her, his eyes watching the drone like he was staring at a ghost from another lifetime. "This is not a weapon we use anymore," he said softly. "This is a reminder." The drone released the device, letting it drop gently toward the ground. Leora braced for an explosion, fire, shockwaves, anything expected. But instead there came a flash of white, not loud, not violent, just a soft pulse of blinding light that washed over the valley like a silent tide. For a moment everything vanished. The world reduced to pure brightness. When the light faded, Leora blinked rapidly, her vision adjusting, and then her blood ran cold. The small mountain that had stood in front of them was gone. Not damaged, not cracked, not burned, simply gone, erased from existence, replaced by a smooth crater that still shimmered with leftover heat. Leora staggered as her breath hitched. She turned toward Ryan, her voice shaking uncontrollably. "Why would you create something like this?" Ryan looked at the crater with eyes full of memories she could never understand. "Because someone once forced us to." The words pierced her deeper than the weapon ever could. She felt the valley grow quieter around them, as if even the earth mourned something lost long ago. She realized humans did not fear their weapons because of their strength. They feared them because they had seen what happened when that strength was used without restraint. As they left the valley, Leora kept looking back, the scenes replaying in her mind. The dust clouds, the vanished mountain, the silent devastation that could reshape continents. She felt the truth settle deep inside her, heavy and cold. Humans were not hiding their power because they wanted dominance. They were hiding it because they were terrified of what they were capable of. And she understood something far more unsettling as she walked behind Ryan, feeling that quiet gravity around him again. Humanity's greatest weapon was not their technology. It was their discipline, their restraint, their ability to carry unimaginable power without letting it consume them. But she also sensed something else rising in the shadows of her thoughts. Something dangerous, something approaching. Because no empire that saw what she saw today would walk away quietly. And she feared the galaxy was already watching, waiting for a chance to test whether humanity still remembered how to fight. The night settled over Earth like a calm blanket of stars. Yet Captain Leora felt anything but calm as she stood beside Commander Ryan Hale on the quiet balcony of Alliance Command. The city below, glowing with soft lights that flickered like reflections of a past humanity was trying to forget. A past she could feel pressing through every silent breath Ryan took beside her. She sensed he was debating whether to speak, whether to open the door to a history no outsider had ever been trusted to learn. And the weight of that hesitation made her heart beat heavier than any weapon she had witnessed in the valley. The wind carried the faint scent of rain as Ryan finally leaned his hands on the railing, his voice low and steady. "You wanted to know where our power comes from, Captain?" His eyes stayed fixed on the city lights as if the memories were carved into the streets beneath them. "You saw the weapons, but you haven't seen the reason." Leora stepped closer. Watching him with careful eyes, she felt something unspoken in him. Something heavy enough to bend a man's spirit without breaking it. She knew she wasn't standing beside a soldier boasting of power. She was standing beside someone who had lived inside fire and come out carrying the ashes in his heart. Ryan took a slow breath that trembled at the edges, barely noticeable but not hidden from her. "Humanity wasn't born powerful," he said. "We were born desperate." The words sank into her like stones dropped into deep water. She folded her arms gently, listening with a focus that quieted every sound around them. "When our nations were young," Ryan continued, "we fought each other for everything. Land, resources, pride, fear, things that seem meaningless now." His eyes darkened as he looked upward, as if the sky itself held memories of smoke. "We built weapons not because we wanted to conquer others, but because we wanted to stop each other from wiping us out." Leora imagined continents shredded by human hands, skies stained with fire from human-made storms, oceans shaking under detonations powerful enough to disturb the moon. She imagined the fear that must have driven humanity to build weapons strong enough to erase mountains. And suddenly the tests she saw earlier no longer felt like demonstrations. They felt like lessons carved from scars. Ryan spoke again, his tone softer. Before the peace, whole cities burned in seconds. Millions died before they even understood what happened. We learned too late that the power to destroy anything also meant the power to destroy ourselves. He paused, exhaling in a way that carried decades of old sorrow. It took us almost losing everything to understand restraint. Leora felt her chest tighten with empathy, fear and awe woven into one. She understood the Vakari Empire, she understood war, but she had never imagined a species that had pushed itself to the edge of extinction by its own hands. She whispered, barely trusting her voice. "You survived your own destruction." Ryan nodded slowly. Barely. The city lights shimmered below them like hundreds of tiny suns, human suns forged from struggle and stubborn hope. And Leora found herself studying humanity from a new angle. Not as a threat, not as a mystery, but as a species that had fought a war against itself and refused to lose. She turned toward him fully, her voice carrying the weight of every question she had been holding since the valley. "Is this why you avoid war now?" He didn't answer immediately. He looked at his hands. The same hands that had once held weapons powerful enough to reshape continents. "Yes," he said quietly, "because we know exactly what we are capable of." The simplicity of his admission made her heart tremble. Humans avoided war not because they feared others, but because they feared themselves. Because they remembered what it meant to hold unimaginable power without wisdom. Because they carried the ghosts of their own history everywhere they walked. Leora stared at him with growing respect. A respect that felt different from anything she had felt toward any leader. It wasn't about rank or authority. It was about the way he carried the weight of an entire species with quiet strength. The way he hid his pain so others didn't have to see it. The way his silence contained the echoes of 1,000 unsaid stories. "Ryan," she said softly, surprising herself by using his name. "You carry this history alone." He gave a faint, tired smile. "Someone has to." The wind shifted again, brushing her face and carrying a gentle chill. She felt the moment deepen, stretching through the space between them, connecting two worlds through shared understanding. But before she could speak, the balcony door slid open and an officer hurried toward Ryan with urgent eyes. "Commander," the officer said. Long-range sensors detected a foreign fleet approaching the outer system. Leora felt her heartbeat freeze, every muscle tensing as the officer continued. "Unknown signatures, not Vakari." Ryan straightened instantly, the quiet sorrow in his expression replaced by the calm precision of a soldier stepping back into a role he hoped he would never need to play again. He thanked the officer and dismissed him, then turned back toward Leora, his voice low but steady. "This is why we stay ready." Her pulse quickened, not only from fear but from a rising sense of inevitability, as if the galaxy itself had been waiting for this moment, waiting to see if humanity would remain quiet or rise again, waiting to test whether a species scarred by its own past could face a new threat, without unleashing the storm buried inside its bones. Ryan stepped closer to her, his eyes locked with hers, and for the first time she saw not just strength but a warning. "The galaxy is changing, Captain, and the next move won't be ours." As the alarms began echoing faintly through the corridors behind them, she felt a chill roll down her spine because she knew the truth. He refused to say out loud, if another empire forced humanity to fight, the galaxy would learn the full meaning of the power she had witnessed today, and nothing would ever be the same again. The alert lights glowed red through the long corridors of Alliance Command, painting the walls like moving shadows as Captain Leora followed Commander Ryan Hale toward the Situation Room. Every step echoing with tension, as if the building itself understood the danger rising outside Earth's peaceful skies. Her heart pounded harder with each passing moment because she could feel something shifting in the air, a pressure, a warning. A sense that the galaxy was about to collide with a truth it had feared for centuries. Inside the Situation Room, holoscreens lit up instantly, showing a fleet moving through the dark void beyond the outer planets, ships shaped like jagged blades drifting through space with the cold confidence of predators. They moved in perfect formation, their engines glowing with a sharp violet light that made Leora's memory tremble, because she recognized the design even before the AI confirmed it. "The Draven Dominion," she whispered, the name heavy and bitter, known throughout the galaxy as a ruthless empire that conquered weaker worlds without hesitation. They feared no species, respected no treaties, and believed power existed only to be used. Ryan's expression did not change, but she saw the muscles in his jaw tighten slightly, a small sign that carried more meaning than fear or anger. It was the quiet shift of a man preparing for the worst. A man who hoped the storm would not come but no longer believed it could be avoided. The AI zoomed in on the fleet, counting dozens of war cruisers, carriers, and destroyers, each one large enough to crush a small moon. Kale, standing behind Leora, exhaled in shock. Why would the Draven come here? Leora felt dread curl through her chest. Because they intercepted our data, she murmured. They know humans have power, and they want to test how much. Ryan turned toward her with a calmness that felt unnatural, the kind of calm that came from knowing chaos better than peace. We expected this possibility, he said, but we hoped they wouldn't be foolish enough to provoke us. His voice held no arrogance, only a tired certainty, and that made Leora's fear grow deeper. As the fleet approached the boundaries of Earth's territory, diplomatic channels opened automatically, sending peaceful inquiries and offers for communication. But the Draven did not answer with words. They answered with silence, a silence that felt like a blade being pulled slowly from its sheath. Minutes later, a cold transmission came through, a tall, metallic-skinned Draven commander appearing on the holoscreen, his eyes glowing with cruel amusement. "Human Defense Commander," he said mockingly. "We have come to inspect your world." Ryan's voice remained steady. "Earth does not recognize your authority. Turn your fleet around," the Draven laughed, a harsh, grating sound that made Leora's skin crawl. "We heard stories," he said. "Stories of a primitive world with impossible weapons, stories that made even our scouts afraid. So we came to see for ourselves whether humans are monsters or myths." His smile widened, sharp and shining. "If you resist, we will cleanse your planet and claim the ashes." Leora felt outrage flare inside her, but Ryan only watched the commander with an expression carved from stone. And she realized the Draven mistake. They thought humans were calm because they were weak, not because they were choosing to be. When the transmission ended, Ryan turned to the tactical officers and spoke with a precision that carried absolute control. "Activate defensive shields around the planet. Prepare long-range interceptors. No one fires unless I give the command." The officers moved instantly, machines powering up, shields unfolding around Earth like a transparent dome of light, fleets rising from hidden bases across the oceans, fields and mountains, humanity's silent guardians awakening after years of rest. Leora walked to Ryan's side, her voice low. "They will attack. Draven don't threaten unless they plan to act." Ryan nodded once, his gaze fixed on the approaching enemy. "They want to measure us. They want to push us until we break. And if they push too far," she said softly, "what will you do?" He looked at her with eyes that held the weight of centuries of human suffering. "What we must, but not more than that." The Draven ships entered attack formation, engines burning bright as energy signatures spiked. Leora's breath caught in her chest, because she knew what was coming, the first strike, the first spark that would wake the fire humans tried so hard to silence without warning. A Draven destroyer fired a beam toward Earth's atmosphere. A test shot, a threat meant to frighten, but it hit the planeteer, shielded and scattered into harmless sparks. Earth did not fire back. Instead, Ryan lifted his chin and spoke calmly. "Send one warning." A human cruiser released a light pulse across space, a gentle signal that carried no damage, only a message, a final chance to avoid destruction. But the Draven laughed again and fired a second time, this one aimed directly at a human ship. It was the moment the galaxy had been waiting for, the moment the balance of power would shift forever. Ryan's voice was quiet but unshakable. "Defensive retaliation only. Target weapon systems. No fatalities." The human fleet moved like a living storm, silent, precise, terrifyingly controlled. Beams of clean white light striking the Draven ships with surgical accuracy, disabling engines, cutting power lines, dismantling weapons without touching the hulls. Leora watched in awe as entire Draven warships went dark, drifting powerless through space, not destroyed, not burning, just gently disarmed. The message was clear. Humans did not need to kill to win. The Draven commander appeared on the screen again, but his mocking smile was gone now, replaced by pure fear. What are you?" he whispered. Ryan stepped forward, his expression calm, his voice steady as stone. "A species that learned restraint the hard way." Leora felt something shift in the room, a realization, a breath of truth spreading like a cold wind through the galaxy's spine. The Draven had come expecting weakness, expecting chaos, expecting a primitive world desperate to survive. But what they found instead was a force capable of ending them in seconds and choosing not to. The Draven fled, their fleet retreating into dark space with terror carved into every movement. When the room finally fell quiet, Leora looked at Ryan, her voice soft but full of awe. "You saved them, even after they attacked you." Ryan exhaled slowly, the weight of everything settling back onto his shoulders, because the cost of war is always higher than victory. What he didn't say but she could feel was far heavier. If the Draven or any empire returned with true intent to destroy Earth, humanity would not hold back again, and the galaxy would tremble before the storm they kept buried in silence. The hours after the Draven retreat felt strangely quiet, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what humanity would do next. Captain Leora stood beside Commander Ryan Hale in the command center, watching the hollow screens flicker between retreating Draven ships and the glowing shield that still wrapped around Earth like a silent guardian. The tension in the room didn't fade after the battle, it deepened, settling over every officer like a warning whisper that said this fight was not over, only paused. Ryan's face held the calm focus of someone who had learned to read danger before it arrived, someone who carried instinct older than training. He watched the enemy ships pull farther from Earth's orbit, but Leora could see in his eyes that he was thinking far beyond the moment, thinking of what would come next, what new threat the galaxy would send now that humans had revealed even a glimpse of their hidden strength. The AI finally broke the silence with a soft alert. Draven fleet no longer in engagement range. Retreat pattern confirmed. The officers around the room let out small breaths, some shoulders relaxing for the first time. But Ryan did not. Leora didn't either, because something felt wrong. The Draven were arrogant, ruthless, prideful. They didn't run after a single failed strike unless they had a reason, unless they were planning something far worse. Ryan turned to the tactical screen, his voice quiet but sharp. "Track their movement, they're not retreating. They're repositioning," and he was right. Within minutes, the heat signatures changed. The Draven ships regrouped into a formation Leora recognized instantly. A pattern used only when preparing a massive full-force assault. Her breath caught as the realization hit her. They were coming back, and this time not to test but to conquer. A wave of intensity rippled through the command center as alarms turned yellow, then red. Shields humming louder as they reinforced their layers. The officers moved with controlled urgency, not panic, but a sharpened readiness that made Leora's heart pound with a mix of fear and awe. Ryan stepped forward, giving calm orders that flowed like a quiet river through chaos. Activate long-range defense batteries. Prepare orbital interceptors. Mobilize ground units to secondary shelters. Keep civilian zones protected at all costs. Leora watched him and understood something profound. Humans did not move like conquerors or aggressors. They moved like survivors who refused to let history repeat itself. Every decision he made was precise, protective, disciplined. It made her chest tighten in a way she couldn't explain. The room dimmed as the tactical screen displayed the full scope of the returning Draven fleet, now doubled, reinforced, an armada worthy of crushing empires. Kyle gasped, the fear in his voice cracking. "They're bringing everything. They want to break Earth completely." Leora felt her stomach tighten, the sheer number of ships stretching across the holographic sky, their engines burning with violet fire. It looked like a storm of blades descending upon a quiet world. She turned to Ryan, her voice barely steady. "What will you do?" He looked at the screen with steady eyes. The eyes of a man who had seen entire cities crumble and still stood for what remained. "We defend," he said softly, "and we do not strike first." The Draven wasted no time. Beams of energy tore across space, slamming into Earth's shield like furious lightning. The air inside the command center vibrated with the impact, the ground humming beneath their feet, the shield flaring bright white as it absorbed the blow. Then came the second wave, heavier, angrier. Aimed to crack the barrier open, the room shook, lights flickering, but still humanity did not fire back. Leora turned toward Ryan in disbelief. "If you don't respond, they'll break through." His voice remained calm, but she could hear the storm beneath it. "If we fire now, we escalate the war. We must give them every chance to stop." But the Draven didn't stop. They launched missiles wreathed in violet energy, their warships closing in like wolves around prey. Earth's shield strained, the glow flickering dangerously. Finally, Ryan gave the order that changed everything. His voice a quiet verdict. "Interceptors. Disable their forward line, focus on weapons only." Human ships launched from orbit like streaks of white light, gliding with silence and precision. their movement so fluid it felt like watching a single being split across the sky. Beams of clean energy sliced through Draven cannons, detonating them before they could fire. Ship after ship went dark, disabled, drifting helplessly yet never exploding, never burning, never destroyed. Humanity fought like a hand pushing away a blade, not striking the wielder, only preventing the cut. It was the most controlled display of power Leora had ever seen. The Draven panicked, their formation breaking. Commanders shouting in confusion as their strongest weapons vanished in seconds. They launched a last desperate strike aimed directly at Earth's surface. A blast powerful enough to wipe out an entire continent. And for the first time, Ryan's composure cracked. Just for a heartbeat, fury flashing through his eyes. Not because of the attack itself, but because it targeted innocent lives. His voice rose, steady but carrying the force of a storm. Defense Grid Omega. Neutralize it. A single human satellite awoke in high orbit, a device so old and rarely used that even Leora felt the air shift as it activated. It fired a narrow beam, almost silent, almost invisible, yet the Draven strike vanished in a ripple of light, erased without so much as a spark. Silence followed, a silence heavier than battle, heavier than fear, because the Draven had seen what humanity kept hidden above the sky. Within minutes, the entire Draven fleet broke formation and fled, not in retreat but in terror. Engines burning at full speed, their commanders shouting orders of desperation. The room slowly breathed again, the red lights dimming back to white, officers lowering their tense shoulders as the danger passed. Ryan exhaled, the weight of restraint settling over him again, and Leora saw the exhaustion behind his calm expression, the pain of a man who had been forced to use power he never wanted to touch again. She stepped closer, her voice soft. You saved them, without destroying them. He looked at her, his eyes tired but steady. That is the burden of strength. Her heart tightened, because she finally understood the truth she had been chasing since she stepped on Earth. Humans were not feared because of their weapons. Humans were feared because they fought with control stronger than any fire, and if the Draven or anyone else ignored that mercy again, the galaxy would face a force it could not survive. The morning after the battle rose with a quiet beauty that felt almost unreal. The sun spilling soft gold across Earth's horizon as if trying to paint over the fear that had shaken the galaxy only hours before. Captain Leora stood on the high observation deck, watching the clouds drift slowly across the sky, the world below calm and silent, almost pretending nothing had happened. But she could still feel the echo of danger in the wind, the memory of Draven weapons humming against the planet's shield, the weight of choices made in the dark, choices that could have changed the fate of millions. She held the railing gently, her hands still trembling from everything she had seen. The precision of the human fleet, the terrifying beauty of their defensive power, and above all, the restraint that shaped every decision they made. She felt overwhelmed, confused, humbled, because nothing she had believed about humans prepared her for the truth she had witnessed with her own eyes. Ryan approached quietly, his footsteps soft, his presence steady like a calm light cutting through chaos. He stood beside her without a word, letting her take in the peaceful view. Even though she knew the calm outside did not match the turmoil inside him, he carried the fatigue of someone who had fought a war against his own instincts, suppressing power that could have ended the Draven fleet in minutes, but choosing mercy instead, choosing life over dominance. The silence between them was gentle, not awkward, the kind that forms when two people have seen something too heavy to describe with simple words. Leora finally turned toward him, her voice soft but full of emotion that trembled at the edges. I don't understand how you do it. He looked at her slowly, a faint crease of concern drawing between his brows. Do what? She held his gaze, the early sunlight reflecting in her eyes. Carry this much power without letting it consume you. Ryan exhaled a breath that felt old, tired, familiar. We didn't always succeed, he said quietly. There were times in our history when power did consume us, times we aren't proud of, but we learned, not through wisdom, but through loss. Leora felt her chest tighten. How do you know when to stop, when to hold back? When every instinct must scream to strike before you're struck. Ryan looked out over the peaceful sky, his expression somber. Because we've seen what happens when we don't. Because the scars we carry remind us that the easiest war to win is the one we never start. His words sank into her like gentle thunder, deep and resonant. She had spent her life among empires that measured strength through domination, species that believed peace came only after crushing enemies. Yet here stood a species powerful enough to destroy entire fleets but choosing instead to disable weapons, protect civilians, and offer chances even to those who came in hatred. She felt a soft ache inside her, a blend of admiration and sadness, because she wondered how many centuries humanity had spent learning this level of discipline, this level of empathy, this level of restraint. Ryan turned toward her fully now, searching her face as if trying to read the emotions she could no longer hide. "You saw what happened yesterday," he said. "But you didn't see everything," she frowned gently. "What do you mean?" He hesitated for a long moment, then spoke in a tone that felt heavy with meaning. "When the Draven fired that last strike, the one aimed at our surface, every instinct in me wanted to unleash everything we had to stop them forever, to prevent them from ever threatening us again." Leora stepped closer, feeling the tension behind his voice. "But you didn't." "No," he said softly, "because that would have ended more than a battle. It would have ended the part of humanity we've fought to rebuild for generations." She felt her breath catch, a rush of emotion rising through her chest. "You protected them, even when they tried to destroy you. That's what strength must be," he whispered. "Otherwise it's just destruction." For a moment the world seemed to pause, held in a delicate balance between their thoughts, the morning light painting them in warm gold, the quiet hum of Earth's shield still lingering like a ghost in the air. Leora felt something shift inside her, something gentle but powerful, a deep understanding forming from the pieces of truth she had witnessed. She realized humanity's greatest weapon was not its machinery or technology, but its heart, its ability to choose peace even when war would be easier, its ability to hold unimaginable power without letting it turn into cruelty. "This changes everything," she whispered, more to herself than him. "The galaxy sees you one way, but they don't know this. They don't know who you really are." Ryan looked at her, his gaze steady. "Maybe it's better that they don't." She shook her head slowly, her voice soft but certain. "No, Ryan, it's worse. Because they fear the wrong version of you. They fear a myth of brutality. But the truth is more terrifying and more beautiful." He watched her closely. "What truth?" "That humanity doesn't seek war because you already mastered it," she said, her voice trembling with awe. "And that you fear yourselves more than you fear any empire." He didn't respond, but his silence was an answer, a quiet confirmation that wrapped around them like the wind. Leora stepped closer, her voice barely above a breath. "You could have destroyed the Draven, but you didn't. Because destruction is easy," he murmured. "Mercy is harder." They stood there together as the sun climbed higher, the world awakening slowly beneath them. And Leora finally understood the story she would carry back to her people. A story not of human weapons, but of human restraint. A story that would reshape the way the galaxy saw Earth. A story that would echo far beyond borders and stars. She felt the truth settle deep in her heart, warm and steady. Humanity was not the galaxy's greatest threat. Humanity was its greatest warning and its greatest hope.